The next principle for us to discuss is unity. Everyone, everywhere, does something that is fundamental to the human condition. They divide people into those to whom the pronoun we does and does not apply. The implications for influence are great because people favor those inside their we groups by a mile. Now, it's important to recognize that we relationships are not those that allow people to say, "Oh, that person is like us." Instead, they are the ones that allow people to say, "Oh, that person is of us." Therefore, the unity rule for influence is that people are inclined to say yes to someone they consider one of them. So, the experience of unity is not about simple similarities, although, as we've seen, those can work too through the liking principle. No, the experience of unity is about identities, shared identities. It's about the tribe-like identities that individuals use to define themselves. The shared identities can be ethnic, or political, religious, or regional, or even workplace identity. Since unity relates to how we form we relationships, Dr. Neidert includes it in the section Cultivating Relationships of his core motives model. It's one of the tools, along with the principles of reciprocity and liking, that you can employ to install or deepen relationships with those you're hoping to influence. Studies have shown that several important benefits come to you once you've established a we relationship. You'll get, first, fewer failed negotiations. Second, less blame for failures. Third, more liking. Fourth, more trust. And finally, more cooperation. Clearly, if a feeling of unity, that is, togetherness, is available to us, we certainly don't want to bungle that away. You've been learning about the principle of unity, the idea that, as a persuader, everything becomes easier if it's possible to arrange for your audience to see you as one of them. Because inside the boundaries of the concept of we, all influence becomes easier. People are more willing to believe you, more willing to cooperate with you, more willing to compensate you, more willing to say yes to your requests. A powerful factor that leads people to see you as one of them is shared locality. People see those who share their living space, their neighborhood, their community as one of them, as part of their identity. So, people say, "I'm a New Yorker, I'm a Minnesotan, I'm a Londoner." Think about the connection you felt the last time you met a complete stranger while traveling and discovered you were from the same hometown. These kinds of local identities carry the unifying power of place. Let me give you one of the most graphic examples I know. It's a difficult one to describe because it was so toxic. During the years of Nazi ascendancy in Europe, many people were sent to concentration camps. Gypsies, political dissidents, but for the most part, they were Jewish residents of the towns and cities in Europe. Some of the camps were work camps. In these work camps, when any one prisoner violated a rule, it wasn't uncommon for everyone to be lined up, and as a punishment for the violation, a guard would go down the line, counting each person until he came to the 10th, who he would shoot dead. Then he would count to the next 10th person and shoot him or her dead, and the next 10th person, and the next, until he got to the end of the line. There's a sociologist named Ronald Cohen who found an informant who was a guard at one of the camps. Not the one who did the shooting, but one who often observed the process. And one day, he witnessed something that puzzled him deeply. A cold-blooded guard was doing his deadly duty, going down the line, executing every 10th prisoner, until coming to one such 10th man, whereupon he stopped for a second, made a quarter turn, and shot the 11th prisoner. After which, he continued down the line, once again executing every 10th person. Cohen's puzzled informant asked the murderous guard afterward, "I noticed you didn't shoot the 10th man about halfway through. Why was that? Was he an especially good worker? Someone you thought would be useful to the camp in some way because of some skill he had, maybe?" The guard laughed and said, "I don't care about any of that. It was because I recognized him. We grew up in the same town." That was enough to cause this brutal assassin to become a benefactor, but a very narrow benefactor, only to someone who could claim unity of place with him. Okay, I'm going to move away now from this story to say something about the beneficial impact of this form of unity for you. Always look for and mention any commonality of place that you truly share with the person you're trying to move in your direction. It has remarkable force. One of the students in a class I teach, a little older student than most, once told me a story that initially provided a great example of just the reciprocity principle, but which eventually proved to be an amazing example of the power of the unity principle. After hearing one of my lectures about the power of reciprocity and how it could influence people to reply, in one instance, to Christmas cards that had been sent by a complete stranger, the student reported that she was engaged in just such an exchange. 10 years prior, she had received such a card from the Harrisons of Santa Barbara, California. People she was confident she didn't know. Baffled, but motivated by the power of reciprocity, the student and her family repaid the gesture by sending this set of complete strangers a card of their own before the holiday season closed. By virtue of the rule of reciprocation, it just seemed like the right thing to do. The next year, the Harrisons sent them another card. And of course, my student's family again reciprocated. Soon, it was an annual tradition, and the two families exchanged Christmas cards and newsletters for many years. I thought I recognized this charming story as an example of reciprocity. But months later, this student returned to my office to tell me that the story had taken an interesting turn, one that could not be explained by simple reciprocity. The student's son, Skip, was getting ready to head off to college in Santa Barbara, California. And due to some work being done on his dorm building, Skip's room wasn't yet ready. Rather than having him stay in a hotel, Skip's parents thought to themselves, who do we know in Santa Barbara? The Harrisons, of course, the Harrisons. So they reached out to the Harrison family and asked if Skip could stay with them for a few days. Sure, the Harrisons replied. We would love to have Skip stay with us. And so he did. Now, while reciprocity could explain the exchange of Christmas cards, it couldn't explain why the Harrisons would agree to share their home for several days with a college student they'd never met. After all, the Harrisons owed no debt to Skip's family. Cards and newsletters had been exchanged equally at that point. Something more than simple reciprocity was at work. That thing, I realized, was the principle of unity, which we will cover next. Unity has three activators. The first involves bringing cues of kinship or other forms of oneness or we-ness to the top of mind. The second involves doing the same for cues about being from the same place, called localism. The third activator is synchronizing, which involves acting together. Let's go through each of these activators in turn. Let's take a look at activating unity through perceptions of oneness. Most people would agree that they're more likely to grant requests from members of their family or to volunteer to help those who are kin. Anyone can be important to us, but ties of blood, marriage, and adoption tend to create the strongest feelings of we-ness. This was shown in a study by Chinese researchers who asked people to think about their relationships with relatives of varying levels of genetic closeness to them. Parents, for example, were compared to siblings, who were in turn compared to distant cousins. The researchers asked the participants to think about how often they had social interactions with each of these relatives. Finally, the researchers asked each participant to position two on-screen circles, one representing themselves and the other representing the relative in question, so that they illustrated the degree of self-other overlap, that is, unity, that they felt with the other person. The researchers indeed found that the closer the relatives were genetically, the more self-other overlap the participants felt with them. Well, this finding makes sense. Hardly surprising. But here's the question. How can we apply the lesson to our business relationships with people who aren't our kin? The researchers also found that kinship closeness wasn't the only factor that increased a sense of unity inside the relationships. Stronger feelings of unity also characterized the relationships in which the participants had interacted frequently with those they were rating. So, we can elevate feelings of we-ness in a relationship by raising the amount of contact we have with our relationship partner, providing it isn't negative contact, of course. Think about your work team and business contacts. Use the pairs of circles that the Chinese scientists used to illustrate the overlap between you and the individuals you'd like to influence more on the job, such as a valuable colleague, or your manager, or one of your better customers or clients, or a new business relationship you would like to have, or even a damaged business relationship partner. Once you're finished dragging the circles to match how much unity you feel, ask yourself, are there opportunities to increase the frequency of interaction with these people? Because that's been shown to increase feelings of we-ness inside the relationship. Warren Buffett understands how to harness the power of unity. Having created billions of dollars of wealth for his investors, the global financial media have frequently rated him as the most successful investor of his time. While addressing shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway, the company he leads, Buffett regularly and sincerely uses words and messages that draw attention to unity by speaking of the Berkshire Hathaway family of investors. In fact, in one important report to shareholders, he engaged the idea of family in a novel way. Before recommending that investors continue to purchase Berkshire stock, he said, "Although nothing is certain, I will tell you what I would say to my own family today about Berkshire's future." Only then did he launch into a list of the reasons he thought would cause investors to believe in Berkshire's ongoing success. It was a brilliant statement that convinced shareholders by giving them the same information he would give to his close kin, which made them feel even more a part of the Berkshire family. The term similarity has come up already in this training, but in a different context. Earlier, we pointed out that similarity is an activator of the principle of liking and refers to commonalities of tastes and preferences and experiences. However, unity-based similarity is a different concept. It refers to commonalities of membership in we groups that share a personal or social identity. Unity-based similarity is not so much about a feeling of being like others as it is about a feeling of belonging with others who share an important personal or social identity, of being not just like them, but of them, of one of them. Unity can be activated by certain cues of kinship, even when no familiar relationships exist. For example, the closer you have lived to someone, the more likely you are to assume the person is genetically similar to you. This is an understandable assumption, given that for most of our history, humans lived in small groups of genetically similar individuals in their tribes, clans, and bands. Because that assumption has almost always been true for us as a species, it became lodged in our expectations, where it persists to this day. You are likely to feel more self-other overlap with, and consequently more favoritism toward, those who grew up near you or live in your community, even for others you don't know personally. This greater favoritism is known as localism. So, Whenever you uncover information that someone you'd like to influence lives or has lived in the same place as you, be sure to remark on it to that individual. The power of localism can be subtle, but it can make a big difference at the right time. For example, during the 2008 U.S. presidential campaign, then Senator Barack Obama's strategists devoted an unprecedented amount of money to the establishment of over 700 local field offices. They also decided not to staff those offices with external volunteers from other communities or states, as was often done in national campaigns, but instead to spend their funds to find and secure local volunteers to do intensive door-to-door get-out-the-vote duties within their own communities. Why? Because such neighbor-to-neighbor contact takes advantage of the persuasive power of localism. A political scientist's subsequent analysis of the effects of this local field office strategy indicated that it worked very well, winning the election for Obama in 3 closely contested battleground states and, according to the author of the analysis, turning the national result from an electoral vote toss-up into an electoral vote blowout. Knowing what we've learned so far about the unity principle, let's return to the account of the concentration camp prisoner I described at the beginning of this module. Recall that the Nazi guard had come to a 10th prisoner in a line with the intention of executing him, but decided to spare his life. Why? It turned out that the guard had recognized the prisoner as being from his hometown. Because of their ties to the same place, the guard felt a sense of unity with the man. Mere mutuality of place turned a murderer into a merciful responder, but only toward one specific unitized individual. This is not the only instance of the unitizing power of place having a dramatic and life-saving effect. Another example also involved Jews during World War II, but it took place thousands of miles away from the prison camp. As the Nazi Party gained power in Germany and other parts of Europe during the 1930s and early 1940s, many Jews fled. Some of them even made their way to Japan. The safety of those Jewish refugees became increasingly imperiled, though, as Japan became more of a wartime partner with Nazi Germany, which began to press for the mass murder of the Jews residing in Japan. The Nazis went so far as to send the infamous Butcher of Warsaw, Josef Messinger, to Tokyo so that he could pressure the Japanese government on the issue. Despite this pressure, the Japanese government resisted the Nazi demands all the way through to the end of the war. What could account for the resistance? Part of the answer has to do with a crucial meeting between Japanese officials and leaders of the Jewish community. facing Nazi demands to execute the Jews, but wanting to consider the issue from all sides, high-ranking members of the Japanese military asked the Jewish refugee community to nominate representatives to speak on its behalf at a meeting. 2 rabbis were chosen, Moses Shatkus and Shimon Kalish. Each was a respected scholar, but the older man, Rabbi Kalish, was known as a particularly keen observer of human nature. The 2 rabbis met with a tribunal of Japanese military officers who would determine the fate of their people. The rabbis' diplomatic skills were put to the test immediately when members of the tribunal quickly asked 2 pointed questions. First, why do the Nazis hate you so much? And second, why should we take your side against our allies? The Talmudic scholar Rabbi Shatkus was unable to answer the questions in the moment because complete answers involved complex issues of history, economics, and religion. However, Rabbi Kalish, the student of human behavior, immediately delivered a single, unity-based answer to both questions that stunned the tribunal members. Because, he said, we are Asian like you. His response was so impactful because it transformed the Japanese officer's sense of we-ness from one associated with a temporary military alliance to a much more durable bond based on a deeper genetic, cultural, and geographic commonality. After a short recess in which tribunal members conferred on the topic, the leader told the rabbis to return to their people with assurances that they had nothing to fear while under the protection of the Japanese government. And so it was. Unity can also be activated by acting together with others in coordinated or synchronized ways. We humans have a long history of this kind of behavior, especially within our we groups. In fact, unity created through acting together can be strong enough to move people to cooperate with and even to agree more often with the requests of their co-actors. So, let's say you're in a position of assigning tasks within your work team. If you want to elevate feelings of unity among team members, rather than assigning them subtasks to be done individually, have them work collectively or in small groups in coordinated and synchronized ways. The effects on collaboration, helpfulness, and group solidarity should be notable. Let's talk about how the process of co-creation activates feelings of unity. When people work together to accomplish some task or create something jointly, they feel a greater sense of we-ness. Companies often struggle to get consumers to feel bonded with them and therefore loyal to their brands. But it's a battle they've been winning recently by inviting current and prospective customers to co-create with them novel or updated products and services, most often by providing the company with information about desirable features they'd like to see. The evidence is clear that this practice produces both greater favorability for the company's brand and more loyalty to it. However, within such efforts at co-creation, consumer input must be requested as advice to the company regarding how to improve its offerings, not as opinions about how to do it. Why? When you ask for another's opinion, you get a critic. But when you ask for advice, you get a partner. Research shows that these only slightly different wordings, requesting advice rather than opinion, have a significant impact on consumer engagement with a brand. That's what happened when a group of online survey takers from around the U.S. were shown a description of the business plan for a new fast casual food restaurant. After reading the description, all survey participants were asked for input, but some were asked for any advice they might have regarding the business plan, where others were asked for any opinions they might have about it. Finally, they indicated how favorable they were to the plan and to the restaurant. Those asked for their advice were much more favorable and supportive than those asked for their opinions. This set of results also clinches for me the wisdom of asking for advice in face-to-face interactions with others. At work, when seeking the buy-in of others, it's tempting to ask for their opinion on your idea. Let's say for a new initiative you think would be a step forward for the organization and if adopted would bolster your workplace reputation. You know that getting your colleagues' support for your plan would make it more likely to be accepted by your superiors. So, taking your cue from the co-creation research, don't ask for their opinions on the idea. Instead, ask for their advice on it. That approach is more likely to create helpful collaborators. One very recent study showed that asking for another's advice rather than either opinion or even just feedback on a proposed plan produced more favorable evaluations and better suggestions for how to improve and implement the plan. I don't see how you could ask for anything more than that. Unity is activated in three ways: by cues of kinship, by cues of being from the same place, and by acting together, especially in synchrony. At the same time, the impact of these activators can be intensified by the two amplifiers of unity: the closeness of people's relationship to one another and the frequency of contact in the relationship. Here are some things the sleuths do and ask themselves to harness the power of unity. First, sleuths of influence leverage the principle of unity by pointing to commonalities that foster we mindsets. To do so, they do their homework and research what kinds of things can be brought to top of mind that will make feelings of unity more likely, such as commonalities of place. Second, sleuths invest in creating those mindsets by engaging in synchronization of activities or through acts of co-creation. Next, They highlight the length of time they've been close to others to make real mutual feelings of we-ness more prominent. Lastly, sleuths also avoid unethical behavior by making sure that cues of unity are naturally present and true. They know that doing otherwise would damage the closeness of relationships and result in fewer opportunities to interact with people and build relationships. Now, the main questions that sleuths should ask themselves when seeking to use unity to influence others are, first, have I done my homework to uncover and then highlight cues of we-ness between myself and those I am trying to influence, such as pointing to existing close relationships or commonalities of place? Second, can I arrange for us to work together in a synchronous fashion or to engage in co-creation? Third, have I thought to begin a request to someone I've had a close relationship with by remarking on how long we've been in that relationship? And finally, have I made certain that any efforts I make to employ cues of unity are based on genuinely present features of that situation?